So the last 2 weeks have been kind of interesting with the sound jams. And then the week before that, when we worked with the free-form exercise with a theme, and then would extract from the improvisation something which would then be the given. We'd go back in, we'd work with the given and the theme through the free-form, find another element which became a second given. We go back in with the 2 givens and the theme and build that way. We're trying to put this stuff in a context where it becomes comprehensible. And I'd like to discuss it a little bit in terms of this simple graph that I've come up with. Okay, I had these great notes that I had formulated and left home.
Oh no. So,
The whole workshop planned.
The first time you ever planned it, right? No, I'm serious.
You're right.
Yeah, I know. Joel. You're good. That's really good.
And,
Kelman, my first.
So I'm going to draw an imaginary blackboard. Okay? If you look at it this way, and please feed into this, okay? Because I've been trying to work it out for myself. If you look at it and you're looking at the page this way, so I'll work backwards. If in this column running down was the forms, meaning number 1, deliberation, and we can say that an advanced stage of deliberation is state of being, or deliberation equals state of being. Going down to the second form, it would be sound and movement equals action. Third form would be rap equals narrative and or dialogue. Those are the basic 3 forms we've been working with. And now there's a 4th form, which is outside the space right now. And that is sound, period. Okay, so...
That's the lowest form?
It's the most recent to come onto the list. But it's tricky because we're going to eliminate eventually that line that separates the 3 from the 4th. I'll explain to you how. But now just take a look at this picture of the 3 forms we've been working with, and then a stop, and then sound, which right now is outside the space. Any questions so far in terms of what I mean by forms? Okay, now running across this way, like that goes this way, right? Now going this way is very simple. Okay, column 1 is the individual. Okay, so it's the individual and his relationship to the forms. In other words, your execution of the different forms. Next column over is the collective, which has to do with the collective's relationship to the forms, which also includes now, when we move to collective, how the individual relates to both the forms and the other people the individual is working to. So the task increases. Not only do you have to have a mastering of the forms, but you have to be able to execute the forms in relationship to the collective. Does that make sense? In other words, the task becomes more difficult. When you're working all by yourself, it's one thing. When you're working all by yourself and with somebody else, it becomes that much more difficult. When you're working by yourself and with 2 other people, it becomes that much more difficult. And so on and so on and so on. So the difference between the collective and the individual is that you as an individual in the collective not only have to relate to the form, but you also have to relate to the other individuals in the collective. Okay, now if you move over another column, we move to content. Content is basically what we've been calling, and it's not going to say that, we've been calling it sometimes the given. Okay, now the content basically is that which you are mindful of, which supplies the content of the investigation. It can come in the, and just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, it can come in the form of a theme, an idea, a concept, a story, a feature, text, etc., etc., etc. In other words, it's anything you want to lay on these other elements. In other words, it's anything you want to be mindful of when you come in to create. So we have the 4 forms, bump, and then across we have 3 other elements, the individual, collective, and content. Now, that takes it one step further than the collective, because now the individual has to not only relate to all the forms, but while the individual is relating to the other forms, it has to be mindful of the other people the individual is working with, and also has to be mindful of the theme or whatever, the content. And that's it.
Are you going to put that up on the graph and then you can, and
Okay, now let
can
me
we
just
get
look a little bit more.
we need 0.
Okay, that is it.
20%.
That is it generally. Now working backwards from that and working forwards from that, please listen to this, okay? Because remember that when it comes to every one of those forms can be broken down into their own shopping lists, which have to be mastered. In other words, every one of those forms have certain elements that you work on individually, okay? And the form, like deliberation, or sound and movement, or rap, is eventually the sum total of all those different elements that go into it. So if you take a look at these different forms and what they eventually become, deliberation, state of being, sound and movement, action, rap, narrative, and or dialogue, working yourself back, in other words, inclusive in that is a lot of different things that you've worked on individually. So when you're doing sound and movement, you're also doing the whole shopping list that comes along with sound and movement, right? That's on the back end of all this. On the forward end, where we still want to go with these things, okay, is, for instance, where sound and movement becomes action. I don't even know if you have to write this down. I just want you to follow the logic. Sound and movement becomes action through the on the train, off the train. Right? On the train, you discover a reality. You go off the train, you play the action or the reality right now in cycles. And where we eventually want to go, okay, with these cycles of reality, is to a point where the mechanical rhythm of the cycles start to break down, and we're simply playing the reality itself, which consists of sound and movement. Everyone follows that logic? Okay? And we started to break down the cycles a little bit through what? How do we do that? Through discovering the other side, which would give us another element as far as the story of that cycle is concerned. Remember? In other words, woo, woo. And then I discovered the other side, which would give me more information about the story that was taking place in that cycle. But eventually we want to get to a place where cycles can break down. while in the course of a particular reality. This takes us back to the sound. Now, if you notice in the sound, when we're working on that side of the line, okay, the sound was sound, only sound, really. But when we put the things over here and we started to play them, at least for the people who were over here, it wasn't just sound, but it was also movement, except the person was sitting down and characters would be revealed and everything like that. So when you're doing the sound exercises, really, considering the reality that you exist, you're also doing sound and movement, except you're sitting down. Okay? Now, if you look at it that way, what happens is that while doing the while doing the sound, you're actually doing sound and movement sitting down. And for what was happening, you saw also that you were going beyond sound and movement sitting down, but you're actually playing realities sitting down. So that really the sound exercise on this side of the line, you know, once you allow the consciousness of the self to enter into it, is really sound and movement as action with a breakdown in the cycles. Right? So we're going to practice this coming from both directions, so that eventually the sound exercise and sound and movement really take you to the same place, which is simply the playing of realities, okay, without a specific regular rhythm. Peter?
Probably the main difference in the two exercises, the two forms would be the on the train and off the train is in sound and movement. Probably the movement is where you make most of your discoveries off the train, and then the sound.
Right. So sound and movement. The movement is the evocative element, and in the sound exercise, the sound is the evocative element. Okay. It's interesting because when I work with sound and movement, and I've tried to say that sometimes, I get a lot of my realities by focusing on the sound while I'm doing sound and movement. I feel most people don't focus enough on the sound, but maybe it's because I've done a lot of independent sound exercises first, so that the sound is very evocative for me also when I'm doing sound and movement. Now, as we start to develop this process more and more and more, it's very important in the development of it, because in the fall, what I want to do is use it toward the creative process in terms of the next step, which is actually to develop pieces on different levels, like we started to do when we were working with the Gibbons and the discovery of the Gibbons and then going back in. But I really need dialogue. The dialogue becomes very important. I've been having interesting dialogues with Peter, just general dialogues with just me actually working on his piece, but it's led to just dialogues about the process and everything like that, which is very stimulating for me. And it just makes the whole thing easier to do. I mean, what are the questions, you know, as the questions come up? So, I mean, if you can think of it, that we're all on this journey, you know, in terms of investigating through this process, through this creative process toward the creation of pieces. Any questions that you have or any problems that you run into is contributing to being able to make your way through this journey. For myself as well, because you know there's points you reach and then suddenly it's a wall, and then boom, there's a breakthrough. I feel like there's been some really big breakthroughs for me in terms of what I'm starting to see now over the last month or so. You know, that's why I'm getting so excited about this thing. Anybody have any questions or anything they want to say? Yeah, Ross.
Unfortunately, I wasn't here last 5 workshops, so we have sound outside space. What is that?
We'll be doing some of that tonight.
Okay. Okay.
It's another exercise that we're doing. So anybody have anything that they want to say?
You know, it just seems to me that the three forms, and actually the fourth form is just, the three forms are really sort of the basic means of working, but you don't have to be doing theater, you know, you can be doing sound, and you're still working through the same process, the inner process.
You mean you can be living your life and doing the three forms?
Yeah,
well,
it's all the same thing.
Well, the form of performance is very close to the form of living your life. I mean, you know, in living your life, you don't usually walk around with an instrument or a palette of paints or whatever. You know, you just walk around. You know, is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, that's why.
Say that again.
Well,
The form of performance.
the form of performance, on a certain level, closely resembles the form of living, generally speaking, because in other art forms, you're usually carrying something with you, like an instrument or, brushes or whatever. In this one, you carry yourself like you do in life, which I think is what makes it so difficult and also so easy at the same time.
Probably what it is, you know, this is the reality that you're in. The performance is a reality, and you're in another reality in everyday life. And so it's just the mindset that this is a reality that you're involved in.
That's the
Yeah,
given. That's a given. Could you consider that being a given?
Could you consider what to be a given?
Which circumstance you're in.
Could you just say that's a given? You know, the given is this is the stage. The given is this is stage number 2. It happens to be real life. Real life. You know.
But that's what's inspired people to write certain books, I guess, like The Master Game, or I mean, there are people who say a lot of times when I'll talk to somebody, you know, about, well, what do you do? I do theater, and they'll say to me, my life is theater. So, and I say, oh, right. Now what do we do?
Why is it makes it more difficult now? I know we are closely related, our living and in here. If we are conscious of, it's more difficult.
It's more difficult here?
Yeah,
than
we are
over
conscious,
there.
yeah. We have to suffer so much.
I think it has to do with unconsciously a promise has been made, a deal has been made. This is my theory, one of my theories, is that when you step over the line, okay, there is kind of a promise being made that you will give to me and take from me things that you would not give and take on the other side of the line. And I can expect that, okay? I can expect you to reveal and open up and give me certain things, and you can expect that from me, that I would not expect you to give me on the other side of the
That should
line.
make it simpler, easier, but more difficult.
It makes it easier.
Because I expect, so we expect from each other.
Well, it makes it more difficult in that we're not used to giving it. And we're not used to asking for it or demanding it.
Mhm.
In other words, another way of looking at it
That's
is
what's
that,
wrong with this stage.
well, on this side of the line, you might even say that not too many dreams are permitted, okay? Which you might say, not too much of reality is permitted if you regard dreams as reality, okay? So on this side of the line, reality is almost demanded. And maybe one of the reasons it's like this is because that's a lot you're asking for, you know? I mean, I don't even give that to my wife or my husband, and you want me to give it to you? I don't even give it to my mother or
Or to
father.
yourself.
Well, certainly, you probably think you give it to yourself.
No, yeah, no. I think a lot of us don't give the time to focus on what's really.
But I mean, you go to sleep and you have your dream. Doesn't mean you're going to take me in on it. You know? That's just one idea why I think this is so hard. You know, I I mean, here we're trained in a different way. We're not trained to reveal. We're trained to conceal, basically. And it's the reason I don't like most plays, because most plays are about people who are trained to conceal. And that's why they're psychological dramas. You know, you sit there and you figure out what they're concealing. Right? Isn't that what it's about? The doctor's really in love with the maiden over there, and she really hates her mother, but she acts this way because this is happening. And so that's what most regular plays become, those kinds of dramas, you know, where psychology is what lets you in on what's going on inside.
And what lets us in on what's going on inside over that line?
What
lets
lets you in?
the audience in on what's going on?
Well, hopefully the nature of the piece will be one that reveals that
Okay.
externalizes that which is happening internally.
Okay.
Okay. So usually what happens, in terms of what we're being asked to do a lot of times, is externalize the internal behavior. Whereas out here, what we do is we externalize the camouflage of the internal behavior. And so we recognize the internal behavior by that which is not revealed, or the other thing that is revealed, which is the symbol of it. You know what I mean? So usually when you watch, let's say, a regular play, and it's something we were talking about today, and it makes you sad, it doesn't make you sad because you are a part of the sadness, but you identify with the camouflage that that person, okay, you recognize its sadness because you do the same thing.
But that person is, if this person's really into it, they're recreating and creating that moment of sadness and feeling it.
They're creating a symbol of it, which is their reaction to it. Now, I don't know what sadness looks like, but I would like to find the image of sadness, not just the image of somebody acting sad.
But it's more than an image, it's a feeling. It's
Right. But then the challenge becomes, when you start to move into different aspects of theater, more stylized, what would sadness look like in terms of an image? You know what I mean? Can you ever like hit that one?
So it's like the difference of an abstraction and a reality. Because
but there's some basic.
identifying what isn't the reality.
Okay, but the performer up there is creating that feeling, which is pretty basic. I mean, you know it, no matter what it looks like, you can feel it. I mean, the image may change.
Well,
but
I don't know how much of it you don't feel through your own identity with that symbol. In other words, when he goes like this, I don't know if you don't feel sad because you know about this symbol, because it's the one you've been trained to use too. So that symbol evokes a kind of memory of sorts. That's all I'm saying. And what always fascinated me was, what would sadness look like? You know what I mean? In other words, painters can paint it. Musicians can play it without necessarily oppressing it. You know what I mean? Because
But I don't think you could ever say this is the symbol for sadness, because it'll
what
vary.
I mean is, you can play a series of notes, okay, and the strain of those notes can evoke sadness.
That,
Or some.
that could be two things. One, it could be the training that we've gotten in previous witness events, or two, it could be truly that given the freedom of not having a face, given the freedom of just noise, you can then maybe touch an untrained part, so you can fit inside.
Right, but I'm saying I think it's easier to do that
Yeah.
with the art forms that don't resemble life so closely. You know? What were some of the other things we were talking about? Some interesting things came up in terms of the audience. That I want to explore more this thing of
What?
Did you tell somebody you were videotaping today?
Who's that?
I don't know, some girl said, are you showing videos tonight?
What's her name?
I don't know.
No, I didn't tell her.
Does it sound cute?
She leave her number?
No, I mean, I didn't even want to.
Did you have dark hair? Do you have a video call?
She said,
What was your feeling? What was your gesture?
But just very briefly, and this is an aside from the things I've been going over, one of the things talking about how if you relate to the space, can you do pieces where you relate to the space as the piece, rather than just the stage? Meaning, can you actually change the space itself? So that the audience has a role and it understands its role without having to be active. Can you activate an audience in a passive way so that their point of view changes and therefore their experience of reality changes? And I was talking about a certain piece that I want to do by Borges, in which he looks at the audience and explains to the audience that he is on a quest, and on this quest he dreams. So the audience finds out that they are, at least in the minds of the performer, part of his dream. And that as he performs this piece, he in his dream is searching for a human worthy of re-entry into the real world. So that while I perform this piece for you, you already know that I am, at least for myself, believing that this is my dream, and that you are creatures of my imagination. And as I perform for you, I'm also checking you out to see if you're going to be the one I'm going to choose. So that's an example of how a role is imposed upon the audience, where the audience itself does not have to fuck it up by actively getting involved in an aesthetic. That's when I stopped bringing audiences into aesthetics, because they'd screw it up. So I found that you could also give them a role, beginning with audience, number one, which is when I started breaking the fourth wall, because I wanted the audience to at least know its role, even if it was just as audience, rather than the role of not being here, which is when you have the fourth wall up. Okay. All the way up to, oh, I know how I'm being perceived. Now, if you're really strong, you can overcome the audience's resistance to, well, I know he's just trying to make me feel like I'm part of his dream. But if you have enough conviction, you can bring some doubt to their perception that they're not part of your dream. You know, I mean, how much conviction can you bring to it? You know, could you bring so much conviction that they're not quite sure by the end of the evening if in fact they are just a part of your dream? I don't know. Or maybe they are just a part of your dream. Should we tell Crico now?
No.
We're not really here. This is all for you, Crico. And it's been...
I know, I missed it in time.
Jody is actually dreaming you right now.
I mean, what was that article that Michael Ventura wrote about Cassavetes and the way he directs, and the whole idea of, he doesn't really direct a scene, he creates an environment in which a situation takes place, and then by creating the environment, the scene directs itself.
Yeah,
By
I never read that,
choosing.
but that sounds great. And it's, I think what I've been talking about over here too,
Well,
is creating an environment in which the right things can happen.
right, and that's like what, I mean, draws me to working either in a site environment, and I'm missing it all the time, but would, you know, instead of working in an environment, working, you know, where you set up a situation, and then the situation informs the performers what they're supposed to do, and you know what I mean? So you have all this other information that's like directives to the actor. You know, and I don't know how to do it in an empty room with one human. You know, I mean, that's
Well,
a very
I
difficult.
think whether you work in a specific site or whether you work in an empty room, it can serve a similar purpose. For me, it gets to be a problem when you bring sets into an empty room,
Yeah.
which don't belong in the empty room. Because the empty room allows it to be anything. So there's that challenge, you know, where through suggestion, you can make it, and that's kind of what I like, you know, where the empty room has every possibility in the world. You know, the one thing I don't like is the regular stage where you bring in a set and you say, this is a real car, or this is a real sun coming in the window, and you see something's not quite right, and it just keeps bothering you all the time. And how come it always meets at the corner over there? You know, why do those walls meet like this? But anyway, in terms of the things we've been working with, does everybody follow the picture of the graph that I just drew? Because keeping that in mind, I think, is what will give you a perspective of everything we're working on, because when you get confused, it should fit into that. It should fit into that graph. Okay? And where we're going to is every one of those things are checked. Okay? So that we're working with the individual in a collective situation with, in varying degrees, a given related to content. And we're doing it with one of those, and we're doing it through these four forms.
Yeah.
So essentially that's what we're talking about. Now, the key is, and that's the hard part because it's so fragile, how do you play in the form, being individually strong, and at the same time, because there's so many different places you can be at any one given time, how can you also be in touch with your partner? Because if you give up your individual self, your partner has nothing to relate to, and you have nothing to relate through. You know, at the same time, if you only hold on to your individual self, you won't have any room to let your partner in.
Which I do, right?
Yeah, your name came up in the course of a conversation about where you might have problems. Somebody suggested, I forget who it was, that it might be a language problem. Because sometimes you say something to me and I go, like that, like what you just said before. I said, well, Greco really does get it. Could you help me to understand what happens?
Okay, let me think about it and next.
Remember, like one time I worked with you, and you sensed the difference when I was working with you, how I wasn't letting you get away.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I said that.
Yeah, so how did you know that I wasn't letting you get away? Unless you know what I'm talking about. And what happens to you when you work with somebody else and you have trouble yielding or listening? Do you really have trouble yielding or listening? Or do you make a conscious decision that, I don't know, what do you think?
I think it's combination.
Is it being afraid that, well, if I listen or I yield, I'm going to lose touch with myself, with what I have to do? That my form will break
No,
down?
that used to be more. It's getting less and less.
It's getting less and
Yeah,
less.
it's getting less and less.
But is that where it's coming from? The lack of confidence that you haven't got the elements down strong enough where you can afford to yield and listen. Because if you do, you're going to lose your concentration on the elements.
Not as much as it used to be.
But is that part of it?
Part of it, small part of it, yeah.
Can people relate to what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what's the other part? If that's part of it, what's the other part?
That's good, but what's the other part?
I have to think about it, yeah.
But you know there's another part.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes. I might tell you privately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to say in reference, not to Greco, but in reference to themselves and the problems? I mean, I can tell you problems I have with the work, because I have the same problems everybody has with the work. You know, the same fears and everything like that. But probably the big difference is that I've done it more times so that I know better than anybody that it's not going to kill me because I've survived it more times. And I think we talked about that a little bit, maybe it was in this workshop, that in performance, the more you survive performance, the more confident you get that you will survive performance. So the less afraid you are that it's going to kill you. And your confidence grows
What do you
to
mean,
that degree.
survive?
In other words, I mean, the ultimate fear is death. You know, so, I mean, in terms of performance, I mean, working back from death, there might be being stoned, being totally humiliated. I mean, I actually got stoned on stage once. I had to run for my life.
You were stoned?
I was stoned on stage.
Well, performers for centuries, for years have used "I died" out there.
Yeah,
As-
I was gonna do a performance. At one time, I wanted to do performances where I give out tomatoes, but I was afraid that people would use them just because they wanted to throw tomatoes. I didn't trust that they would use it only if they didn't like the performer.
Yeah, just
Because
depends.
I felt that would be great for performance. Because if you could take tomatoes and eggs, you could take anything, you know. Like the first time I ever performed, I think I told you the review was, I hope this boy has another way of making a living, which I always felt was the best thing that ever happened to me because it was so humiliating and so frightening for me to go back and perform the next day that if I could overcome that, then I could overcome anything.
Mine was people who don't understand satire should not attempt it.
But,
I met somebody that way, I can't remember.
so the more you survive, the more confident you are that you won't die. And working your way back from that is like being stoned, is like the audience will kill you, they'll
Walking
take out
out.
knives and destroy you.
Being left.
All the way to they don't like you, which is another way of killing you, or, you know, or they don't think you're good, you know, they think you're bad. I mean,
Or you may get out there and forget everything.
well, that's,
But that's-
what's the result of that is what
Yeah.
you fear,
Yeah.
you know.
Or they fall asleep.
Fall asleep. But we're talking about this rejection, which is really creating your non-existence, or you don't exist as a worthwhile entity of any sort.
And the bottom line really then is, I might die.
But the bottom line is, I think, for everything,
Yeah,
death.
because it might just be so painful, I'll die.
It is, every time.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Easier to die.
what I
It's so
mean is that the
painful.
unknown is
unknown.
the equivalent of death. I mean,
Yeah.
stepping into the void,
Yeah.
you know.
But see, how do you avoid getting so angry?
What do you mean angry?
I get really mad at all of,
You get very mad before you go on, or after, or when?
no, while I'm making the
While you're working on
making the
things.
piece.
Well, that's
yeah.
fear though.
It's still a
Anger
fear
is
of death.
Oh, I know, it's so fearful though, but the thing is like, it's almost like at a certain point, you know, it's like, why ever make another piece again if it's that much of a
Who
struggle?
are you angry at?
Because I think that that's the creative
I
process.
think part of it is doing it over and over again so that because the anger is coming from the intimidation. So either you keep doing it so that you're not so angry, and you also come to understand what it is so you're not so angry, or you find another way to make a living.
But see, I think that that's
Yeah,
all
but
part of the creative process, is all of the steps that you go through, and anger is one of them, because that's the fear, and that's what you have to work through. And then what we're always working for is that hit, and that's the addiction
But I
of creating.
really do believe that the answer to all those things are consciousness. In other words, consciousness takes you to a greater priority than your own emotional state.
It's being able to have that consciousness, though, because the other part of us keeps us in denial. It's just like the camouflage you were talking about. Our denial, or for me anyway, my denial starts getting in there so strong, then this battle starts. And for me, trying to find to be conscious, because my denial system is so good, to break through the denial to find out.
But I find also that to the degree that you believe in the piece that you're doing,
Yeah.
okay, where you become a messenger, where you come with the idea of performing a service, okay, to that degree you concern yourself less and less with whether or not people are gonna like you,
Yes.
okay? Because your intention is more noble, okay?
So the intention is to be of service.
The intention is to be of service, right? And the best way to be of service is to get to things that are really important to you, to share with other people.
No matter how mundane it may appear, like the pages.
Well, it can't be mundane if it has an urgency for you. You
Okay.
can't receive
Oh,
it.
well, I guess I'm saying, comedy.
Entertaining.
Yeah, doing something entertaining instead of having a heavy message. When within the message.
I think that's a whole other thing. I think
Okay,
that has nothing
okay.
to do with what I'm saying.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
you can,
That's a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever vehicle works best is the vehicle you
Yeah.
use, whether it's, yeah.
But if you do it enough times and then you get out there and you prepare yourself, after a while you're going to know that they're going to basically, you're going to be okay. I mean, you never know how they're going to respond to you, but if you go through the process of enough and you prepare yourself, you know that you're going to be at a high level or whatever level, so that it'll be all right.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, that word experience. Like, I used to wonder sometimes, there'd be like an old fighter coming up against a young fighter, okay? And they'd say, well, the young fighter's faster, the young fighter's stronger, the young fighter's got this, the young fighter's got that, but the old fighter's got more experience. And I'd say, shit, that doesn't mean anything. What's experience? It's like totally abstract, you know? But then I realized that what experience was that the old fighter had gone into the ring 100 times and survived, so he's not preoccupied with how he's going to do anymore. He knows he's going to survive it. The young fighter who has all the skills, okay, and has not been in the ring that much, might have his concentration interfered with, where he might not be utilizing all of his skills because he has not gone through it enough times to know that he's going to be all right and he can stay focused.
And the old fighter also knows he has survived the booze, he has survived failure, he has survived loss.
I don't even think he has to think about that.
Well, but he's done that. And
What I'm
so
saying is that basically the old fighter can go in there and not even think about any of that stuff.
Because he has survived it all.
So it's the same thing getting on the stage.
Yeah, but so the old fighter still has to go from step one to, the internal experience is the same as the young fighter.
What do you mean by the internal experience? What
The
internal
internal
experience?
experience of first deciding to go box and then to start
Yeah,
working
but we're
out.
assuming, I'm talking about the day of the fight.
Okay, the day of the fight. The internal experience is starting it, and you've got to get to where you're afraid you're going to lose. You've got to get to feeling pain, to feeling anger. And
No,
then you
that's
get,
not what I'm talking about then. Let me take you to the point of, okay, you're on in 2 minutes. Okay, you're on in 2 minutes to do your show. Okay, the experienced performer, let's see, I got to focus on this, I got to focus on that, I got to focus on this. My heart's beating a little bit, so what? I've experienced it so many times, it doesn't make any difference to me, but I will focus on this. The one who hasn't been out there so much can sing, can dance, can do this, can do that, but it's like, oh God, what if they don't like me? You know, I haven't really gone through it that many times, you know what I mean? So it's like, what was that?
but isn't that older guy still going through that experience? That's absolutely essential for him to have the adrenaline to even be able
You're
to
talking
be
about
mindful.
the adrenaline. I'm not talking about the adrenaline. I'm talking
No,
about the thing.
it's not the
I'm talking about the thing. I'm talking about the thing that interferes. In other words, the one who's been through it so many times is able to use it to focus. The other,
Right, to use it.
but the other has not
You
been.
have to have
The other has not gone through it enough times where it has not
Right.
become not a distraction.
Right, but you're still having something to use, and that something is the essence of, it's the energy that's going
That
to
doesn't
propel you.
necessarily mean fear.
I don't know which one you're talking about.
He's saying that the internal experiences are the same for both, and
Just one
they're-
may go quick.
but they're not.
Except it's a matter of degree.
Yeah, exactly.
One
Degree.
simply feels adrenaline and relates to it as simply a state of being that he's been through many
The other
times,
goes through
or another experiences it as something that's going to fuck him up, and as a result of that, it does fuck up the concentration. Okay? So Kedra can say to me, oh man, I'm really nervous tonight, but we both know it doesn't make any difference. Somebody else could say, I'm really nervous tonight, and that could really throw the performance off. Because that person doesn't know that it doesn't have to throw your performance off. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. What else? Have we been talking about trivia? Yeah, Peter. Stay on the line.
I guess we were talking about problems we may experience on the other side of the line.
We're talking about what?
Problems we make.
Problems we might experience on the other side of the line. I think that's where we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I notice in relationship to what we're talking about, how your energy is spent, whether it's spent in a concentrated manner or whether it's wasted in another vein. And I think where a lot of my energy goes, am I doing it right or am I fucking up?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, how would you relate to that now compared to, let's say, 6 months ago or a year ago, in terms of your concerns? And I throw that out to everybody. Do you find that you concern yourself less with doing it right?
Maybe sometimes,
Oh,
I think so the time you really get to focus on it, I mean, you experience it to some extent, but when you really get to focus on it is in deliberation, I think. Sometimes you get into it and it's working, but sometimes you don't get into it and it's not working.
Do you think it's because you bring in the rest of your day?
I mean, whenever you're working with an ensemble,
You don't. It's just sometimes it works for you.
I don't think in other words, I think when you ask that question, I think you're asking the wrong question. Because I think one of the things you have to learn is to ask the right questions. In other words, bringing in, to me anyway, if you're bringing in a bad day, it's mainly because you haven't learned to work right. Because some people, this, for me, becomes the relief. In other words, as bad a day is, thank God
At least
I'm
I
here.
got this.
Yeah,
Right,
so I
yeah.
can let go of that day. You know what I mean?
but see, to me, that's what discipline is. You know what I mean? That's why, because I have been studying forever, and I just keep on going, fuck, why do I keep doing this? And it's all, to me, it's just to remind your mind how much concentration it takes just to say, okay, I'm here now, and I'm doing this performance tonight. And I'm not going to worry about how I'm making a living. I'm not going to worry about my father's dying. You know what I mean? But it's discipline. It's not just a good day or a bad day.
But this also reminds me that, oh wow, this is the real world.
Mm-hmm. The studying.
Well, the working out is the real world.
Right.
I can drop that fantasy that got the best of me out there.
It's training,
You know.
But the thing is that that's another thing. It's like when we were all doing the show 4 nights in a row or whatever it was. I mean, every night was different. You know what I mean? And there was like one night that unanimously everybody felt that was the best night. You know what I mean? And in a way, it's almost, it doesn't matter in a way. You know what I mean? The fact is that you lay out an outline, and that's what the piece is. And every night it will be different.
What does the word team mean?
What is it?
T-A-I-N?
Tame?
Team.
Acting?
Team.
No, as in tame. Is there such a word as tame? Because I'm just wondering, entertain. If you
Get.
Oh, so
Team is
Latin.
get. Team is
Oh,
get.
it's from the
Is
Latin.
get?
In
Get.
Latin.
Obtain, to get.
So
No, obtain
enter?
is just
To
that.
get.
Enter.
Yeah, obtain. What is team? Anything?
A Latin root.
Tame is the Latin word.
Get.
Latin root meaning what? You've had Latin.
Like I didn't know what perform was until I realized that perform means a conscious relationship to form. Okay.
Per is the Latin word for group.
And then suddenly,
Through the form.
and suddenly,
That's
I realized why all actors weren't performers, because most actors are not conscious of form. In fact, you're taught in a naturalistic state to be unconscious of form, just like you are in reality. In reality, you don't concern yourself with
Depends
your
on
form.
the teachers. That's not quite true. In other words, good in some areas.
Yeah, but you work separately on your form. But when you go into actual work, you're not concerning yourself with how your arm moves. It just moves that way.
Oh, you do if you believe, as some teachers do, that the body and There are teachers who work very close to this, that if you make a movement, that sets something up inside and brings out the state.
But the consciousness of that movement in performance itself would stylize
But
things.
you become used to that movement, and it becomes a trigger for you. So it becomes part of the content of your work with some teachers. For me, the best part about this is, well, twofold. First of all, staying centered. Over the last 5 years, I have grown to recognize immediately when my center is rising in any situation, and also how to get back to center for me. That applies to anything, including performing. It was never that clear to me before. And also how focusing on what I'm doing relieves tension and stress. Just focusing on the task or the work just relieves all this other stuff that used to go on. Worrying, is this right? Just focusing on that alone and freeing it's very freeing.
I mean,
Very hard.
anyway.
Well, it's staying
there's-
present, is what it is.
you know,
But
all-
isn't that what it's all about?
What's that?
Staying present?
That's part of what it's about. I mean, it's about so many different things.
Yeah.
And
But I mean, one of them
And it
is,
varies from individual to individual.
What-
and how capable are we within our mind to stay present at all times?
Nobody can.
Well,
nobody can
when
stay
you said it
conscious.
varies,
Well,
what?
for example, she was saying that, or if you have a shitty day and you gotta get up for a performance, it's hard to just change and get into that. But sometimes if you have a shitty day, you can use that in your performance. Why leave it, So it just depends on how you can prepare yourself.
It's funny because when I was talking to Peter, I was telling him that in the interviews with Michael Jordan, one of the reasons I like him so much is that when he talks, I hear so much of the same vocabulary I would use in relationship to performance.
What is that?
And they even said yesterday, they said the secret to the Bulls' success is their defense, and the secret to their defense is their ability to recover. And of course, it's always
Well,
what
you
it
say
is.
that
They're dropping that.
What?
They don't carry the failure with them.
Well, what they do also is somebody misses, somebody else picks up for
Right.
them. So they don't go, oh shit, you fucked up, or I fucked up. They just pick it up from there and they recover. You recover. I
But
mean,
the
It
sense
becomes a
of-
game of recovery instead of a game of doing it right.
and there's never been that much of a difference for me between sports and theater
No.
in that
Absolutely.
respect.
Yeah, but see, that's what's so different about, theater that was really based probably when you were younger. No, but I mean, when ensemble work was a big deal. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is not as emphasized in America. I mean, when I was in Europe, I felt like ensemble work is everywhere. People work in ensembles and take pride in it. And here, it's like everybody wants to be the star. You know what I mean? Everybody wants to do their own little.
But there was a reason why it was ensemble work was such a big thing, and that's usually because the ensemble had a vision
Right.
that everybody was able to yield to, that everybody believed in, so you could give up some of your personal whatever.
And there are lots of ensembles, but they don't necessarily
I mean,
work.
here in LA, like in theater, for instance, there's a lot of groups, but really the reason they all belong to groups is because they want to get a play on where they hope an agent will pick them out
Right.
and put them in the movie, not everybody else. You know what I mean? That's why the groups don't really work too well, Okay. Anyway, what about you, Tim?
He's an artist.
Any thoughts on that?
Recovery is big.
I'm in a
And
12-step
I've noticed
program.
that you can use it in everyday life. It's great. And in fact, I had an episode the other day when I was talking to someone and I started getting really self-conscious because, I was having to listen a lot to this person and I didn't quite know what to do. And
How'd you look like a listener?
and I just said, well, I realized my center was rising. I said, just, get into the moment and listen to each word, or it's great. I don't know what to say.
I have a problem. When my son arises, I just react. I mean, I don't know. Oh, just be quiet.
Oh my God, whatever gave you that idea?
Well, in acting, you talked from the very beginning that the key is to listen and to look.
Yeah.
To look and to listen. It's the whole thing. Okay, so, let's, what if we just started off with, I'm going to just play with different variations of the things we've been talking about. Okay? So, let's just get a chair over here. No one So one of the things that I'm really happy about that seems to be happening more and more and more is, another element that we've added, which people seem to not be having too much of a problem with, is that, now you can arbitrarily and deliberately do whatever you want. Here we've been working with, you have a good idea, don't do it. You have a good idea, don't do it. You have a good idea, don't do it. And then suddenly, one day, in our vocabulary is, well, if there's anything you feel like doing, you can do it. When I came in with that, I expected outrage. Total outrage. But it just it was sort of like, oh, okay. So can anybody give me any feedback on that? Just in terms of, how come that's suddenly okay? And how come when it is done, it doesn't seem to be done the way it would have been done originally?
Yeah, it seems like we know our priority now. And our priority isn't being creative really. Our priority is what's happening in our relationship to it.
So
And we know the language now, and you trust us with it.
So the priority is not to be creative, the priority is to just do it.
In relationship to whatever is happening.
Well, knowing that if you just do it, it will be in relationship to what's happening. So that sounds like confidence, which is really abstract.
I think it's
So
also,
maybe to be creative is not lack of confidence.
Or not even
Lack of
concerned.
confidence in what's happening.
Maybe not a concern with it, but I think it's interesting when you also spoke about the language because there is a language that we've learned to work through now, which close it.
That's
What am
right.
I trying?
No,
Right.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to say we've learned a language, which sometimes, you learn a language to do things, and what it's done is expanded,
Yeah.
not narrowed. It's just like when we get a theme, we tend to go broader than when we don't have one. And so then when you say, if you have an idea, go for it, that we have this language we get to go
I don't say
through.
if you have an idea, go for it. Do I?
Oh, what do you say if you have a,
I don't know what you're talking about exactly, but I wouldn't say if you have an idea, go for it.
what did you say? If you have a,
There's certain times when you can go for it.
I say, if you want to do something, do it.
oh, okay, if you want to do
But,
something. I was coming back from the thing, if you have an idea, don't do it.
I still think if you have a good idea, don't do it.
Don't do it,
An
right,
idea isn't the reality of what's going on, probably.
yeah.
but
Okay,
also
so
we
you
have,
wrong
we always
word.
have good ideas, so that's something we don't have to deal with. But, so we got the structure and the form now, so that when we do go into that area of good ideas, that we know how to work it, as opposed to before it was
So
fighting.
it's interesting in that when I brought this into it, it didn't seem to impress anybody as a contradiction. Where if I had brought it into it much, much earlier, it would have been, well, what do fact that it wasn't perceived as a contradiction,
We've been waiting for it.
I realized that it was the right time to drop
I
it.
was sort of disappointed though in how people reacted.
And that they didn't react,
Yeah.
in terms of what I'm saying.
In terms of doing it.
You mean taking advantage of it?
Yeah.
Oh, but I've seen people take advantage of it.
I didn't see people really push it to any extreme that I would like to see.
Well, maybe that's what Peter means when it hasn't been time yet, or nobody has felt it's been their time yet. But you can't do that. I also wanted to say in the sound, because we're playing with that sound, one of the sound elements that you can use in sound is silence. So silence becomes a valid form of the sound exercise. I wanted to preface that before we start tonight, so that when I'm there jamming, whoop, 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 whoop. Sound and silence becomes a valid part of the sound jam.
Which is a very important part in working ensemble as yielding. Because as I spoke to you about at the end of the sound day, you made a circle and we all played at the same time. And it felt like it didn't work because there was no yielding.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Because everybody was just,
Yeah.
so that's where silence plays a very important part in yielding in the sound exercise.
Uh-huh. And to hear it.
But I mean, and also, yeah, and also it's choreographically it holds up too. I mean, it works both ways.
I want to start off tonight, I mean, just simply with somebody doing a state of being exercise, deliberation, state of being, not exercise, performance, okay? And somebody else doing sound jam outside. So you're working, in other words, all the time that we're working, we're seeking integration, accommodation, empathy, whatever you want to call it, but never at the expense of losing the individual self. You know, the thing is to get the strong self going, and through the strength to yield, or to let things come together. So in other words, no matter what we're doing, whether it's like, okay, go with the 4 forms, or go with the 3 forms, or you just go with this form, you just go with this form, you really get your own individual trip going, and you allow the other to come in. Until you reach the point where you can yield to the other one because it's not going to take away from your own trip. Everyone follows what I mean by that, right? In terms of the strength of that. So I know if I'm going out here to do state of being, that's all I do. And if I'm doing it with a sound person, fine. Same thing for the sound person. I'm going to do sound, and if I do it in relationship to a person state of being, we're jamming together. I'll just get my trip going, watch, let it work on me, but at the same time, and that's where the arbitrary comes in. That's where the arbitrary comes in, right? I don't have to just, I'm looking at the space. I don't have to just, what's being revealed. I can also now just, wow, right? That's the arbitrary. Wow, wow. That's being revealed. I need the arbitrary, because the arbitrary also shows me what's being revealed. Even if it's by me. That's what the arbitrary is. Right? I mean, the arbitrary is you doing the right thing, because you can't do the wrong thing if you're connected and arbitrary and deliberate. And then once you make that move, it too becomes a potential informant of where to go next. It's arbitrary, deliberate. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe all the arbitrary and deliberates, once I'm connected, are not as arbitrary and deliberate as I think. Think. Noi. I mean, noi. I thought it was arbitrary and deliberate, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe. Now, I'll go arbitrary and deliberate. Noi. But I only think I'm going arbitrary and deliberate. Does that make sense?
Metaphysicians say there are no accidents.
So, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I sort of have a counterpoint to that.
Go ahead.
You know, before you would say you can't bring in an idea, but the idea is still an instantaneous change into something else as we view it from the external. But where it comes from inside, I think, determines if it's arbitrary choice within the groundwork that we're working or whether it's an idea. But externally, it could still be viewed as the same thing. And if it's come from the point of what we are calling arbitrary, that means we commit at that next instant to being in that instant, in the next instant.
So what you might walk away with is, well, if I commit, I've transcended the idea.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay, so somebody do sound, somebody.
Straight deliberation?
Well, state of being performance. We're going for the big things now, which is the same thing as what you said, but
Different term.
different.
Do
We
language.
gotta start using more vital vocabularies now. We all know what it is. I mean, just like we know entertainment really is
Garbage.
garbage, right? Entertainment is hammering the nail in. Entertainment is really just focusing. That's all it is, from moment to moment to moment to moment, and taking the appropriate action from moment to moment to moment. That's entertainment. Okay. So, what I mean is, like, what does Frankie do, really? Except stand out there and, like us, and sing a song. What does Johnny do? Except do Johnny, you know.
And how does Johnny do performance
How does he do performance?
rather than entertainment?
Well, when Johnny goes, he gets into it. I mean, it's shitty because he doesn't seem to do too much more than that, ever, you know, but it's okay.
You think the parade of all the soldiers in New York City was entertainment or performance?
Propaganda.
Well, yeah, it certainly was a performance.
It was entertainment, isn't it?
But they say that now the celebrations have run longer than the war itself.
It costs more
In
money.
terms of time,
Cost
we've
$2.5
been having
million.
longer celebrations and now running longer than the war itself.
Today, the parade in New York City cost $2.5 million.
And you know, paid for it?
Private country.
Because in Washington it was paid for by the Defense Department.
So now what are we celebrating? The kids are starving to death because we won't let them afford food?
Well, anyway.
So, but that's the thing that we were talking about earlier, that height now in America has become the commodity that you buy and you're willing to buy. In other words, you recognize the fact that it's height, but if it's good, you'll buy it anyway because it's more important than.
It's a diversion too.
But it is the commodity. In other words, it seems more real than the reality itself.
Oh, definitely. My friend is writing a trailer, a radio spot for a movie, and the movie's really depressing. And he made these trailers about the inner city, and the guy, the head of Columbia said, we want somebody who talks about sex and entertainment. And he's going, but that's not even the movie. I don't care! You know? I mean, he has to say this is a happy, fun-loving movie, and it's a movie about people being shot down in South Central LA.
Right. So that's
All they care about is getting people in the theater.
And the people see the hype, but if they feel that the hype is a good one, they'll buy the hype because the hype is more important than the reality.
I mean, it's amazing.
Maybe it's like hyper reality.
Hey.
Whoa.
But that's just like
Feels like a John
that's like-
Montessori class.
but that's like Iacocca saying when he can't understand why crisis sales have failed. We didn't expect the euphoria of the war to die so quickly. I mean, but he said it in all earnestness, where this was now the product, and that he should be rewarded for it. You know, so now that's what the sale is. That'd be an interesting piece. That the whole piece be hype. So we get out there and we just tell everybody, this fucking piece, man, is the greatest thing you'll ever see. And maybe we just hype it for an hour and a half and then good.
Yeah. Nothing happens. It's just
Except-
all about
except
telling
the hype.
people,
Mhm.
right,
Yeah.
that it's going to be great.
I mean,
It's like titillation and no.
It's like coming out of the kitchen, wait till you taste this dinner.
yeah, we put Creeker on stage. Creeker comes out on stage, and we just tell the audience, you see this guy? This guy can do everything. You know what I mean? Creeker just stands there like this, and we just tell him what Creeker can do, how wonderful he is, and everything like that. Gives us, and then somebody else comes out, and somebody else like that, and these two together, man, you wouldn't believe what goes on. You know, and we just hype for an hour and a half.
I love it.
I'm stealing that.
Let's do it.
Stole that idea.
Scott, I'm sorry, when you were coming on about 4 minutes,
It is
yeah, 4 minutes to perform.
It is
Walked out with a guitar and started talking, oh, I got a picture on
Was that a
it.
secret?
Starts tuning it, starts talking, schlocking, the whole thing. Every second you think he's getting ready to do his song, and you know the time is coming down, and you think he's going to do his song, and there's the time comes down and stops, and that's his piece.
That's sort of like the magic piece I did where I was going to disappear. And I gave a countdown. But the hype piece is interesting because, Peter, I'll show you what I mean. We're going to do something. And then walk off. Now you see what he did?
No.
You didn't see what he just did? Well, when we do the piece, that backward motion goes all the way up in the air, and suddenly you'll see that he's lifted off the ground, okay? He touches a cloud, okay? Comes down in a cloudburst, lands exactly where he started off, completes the stroke, and he walks off. But that's coming a little bit later. Just wanted to show you how it begins and how it ends. But I mean, you can like supply anything you want in the middle. You know what I mean? So maybe we'll do these hypes of beginnings and ends of things, and we'll tell everybody what goes on in the middle if they come back tomorrow.
Okay.
So we can do all kinds of silly things, but when the person goes, Nina, 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 stop it there. Okay, we don't want to give them too much. But that's really just the beginning of the scene in which we enter Africa, you know, and anyway, what?
Well, now you know, for an advertising agency, when they go into the boardroom, it's a rehearsal, actually,
Yeah. It's a rehearsal.
for the hype.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So they're planning the hype.
Right. To get you to come back. Or whatever.
Well, did anybody catch Reno when she performed?
Mm-hmm.
You caught her?
I
She
did.
has that, you caught her? That whole bit about how America used to be real. Did she do that in Mocha? Yum, yum, yum. You know, there'd be the states with the different symbols and everything like this, and this state made steel, and this had maple syrup and everything like that, you know? But now there's no more of these pictures because the states don't produce anything except hype. It's all hype now. And then there's a lady at the bottom of the whole thing with an airbrush, and she's just going, Have I pulled you all? Did you do that yet? That it's all hike? Wouldn't it be wonderful to do an evening of hike? I mean, just bring an audience in, have them sit down, and from beginning to end, everything is just a hike?
Every piece is a tease.
Or it's all one piece. I mean, the piece is hike. That would be a good thing.
You know, just put it as a thing, let's work on it.
It's what?
Do it as a thing, let's see how it goes.
Hike? Well, I want to do these exercises first, but I'm doing more.
Maybe
I'm gonna mark that down.
Why don't you have the greatest show in Earth?
I think if you come up with titles, you can create pieces.
Oh, yeah.
So hike. I mean, what if you said everything you see, everything you will see from now on is not real? Now somebody comes out and does something. Okay, and they leave. Once again, you remind the audience that everything you see is not real. This is an act. Where does it lead? I don't know, but anyway, let's get somebody on the chair and somebody in the space performing. State of being. Don't reach. Don't reach. Just do whatever you want to do.
You know what I mean? I mean, can the sound help?
Ask Tim.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
Carmela.
There was a moment.
Oh, yes,
it made
Carmela.
sound.
No, Carmela, how,
I mean, it just happened. There was one point, I don't remember what, I think I looked
the
over my
rhythm of
shoulder.
the sound, I'm wondering if it will make you do
What is
something.
the question?
How the sound informs the deliberator.
What is the question?
How the sound influences the deliberator, and how it could get them maybe into, because Tim was doing stuff like me.
Yeah, so what's the question?
So my impulse maybe would I be doing, would I like?
What is the question? Try to get the question.
The question is, Scott, how does
Yeah.
the sound maybe intuit or push the deliberator in a certain area? Or does the deliberator just choose not to,
Yield.
or does the deliberator just kind of take that as a background soundtrack more than a motivator?
It's both. I mean,
You just make the choice.
well, no, it's like, it's like,
Okay, you're going off in the wrong direction. So the question then becomes the answer. I mean, what was the question? And that's what's important to understand in terms of your questions. When you say to me, or does the sound become the background, or does the sound become the motivator? So when you perceive it to be the background, it's the background. When you perceive it to be the motivator, it's the motivator.
All right,
So
so
it
if
is.
you had any rules, like if you didn't want,
Well, you kind of,
No, the rules were given in the beginning. The rules being, get your strong individual elements going, and then in the process of that, allow the other thing to come in. That's all. And see where it takes you. So here we go again. Okay, Deb, you're right. Reaction. So where I felt you and all, Deb, was that I felt you got trapped in a place. Well, there was one place where silence was not playing the silence, but waiting for yourself to make the next sound. So that nah, nah, no, 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 yeah.
I felt myself in the silence.
Okay. Don't defend. You don't have to defend. Just telling you my observation, okay? Felt that you stopped playing the sound when you got into that long silence there, and then got a little trapped into trying to accommodate Tim without having your own do-do. In other words, it wasn't in the process of your own individual sound trip at times that the sounds were coming from, allowing that to come in. But the dropping of your own trip and the seeking to accommodate him. Okay, that's just something that I observed, yeah.
But Scott, now, in reference to her original question asking how does the sound affect the deliberator, now how does the deliberator affect the person doing the sound? That is
How does the deliberator affect?
the person doing the sound.
Right.
So, I mean, that's,
The deliberator affects the person doing the sound the way the deliberator affects the person doing the sound from moment to moment to moment. That's the way it does it.
okay. Because, you know, the way she was asking in the beginning, it seemed like the focus was on the deliberator more than, you know, that establishing back
The
and forth.
focus is on me moving through my route and now allowing this thing to influence and be influenced by while I'm moving down my road. Okay? But it is not like waiting to see how this thing influences me. There's no waiting because it is influencing.
Almost like accidental.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing
In the
that,
back of your mind, it's going to be accidental.
It's accidental,
You know
maybe it's accidental, maybe it's, who knows, who cares? I mean, who knows, who cares? Whether it's accidental or not. That's beyond us.
We are performing.
I mean, we're just do. I look at that picture, I can do it with that. Wow. Now, in the course of it,
that's how we should go to Mocha.
in the course of it,
Painting.
I did that at the Museum of Modern Art. We did that at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And so we ended up commenting on all the paintings. We stood in front of a Barnett Newman, 15 of us like vomiting.
I love that.
They wanted to throw us out of the museum. But that was at the end of our piece when we're taking
So
a
then you
bow.
got a cultural affairs performance in a public space.
One thing that I noticed when I was up there that just like suddenly happened was because you were making sound, I was listening for that, I suddenly heard
Everything.
all the other sound.
There was so much
You know, it's
noise.
like, so there were two sounds going on. There were all these chairs creaking and like,
Okay, so nobody ever asked that question. Nobody ever asked that question.
One question.
What do you do with the other sounds?
This sounds something.
What I'm saying is that so that's what the sound is for. The sound is to remind me of the other sounds. That's valid. What were you going to say, Tim?
No, it was really hard for me because it was so acute. The feeling I had for the other sounds that were going on in the room, that it was very difficult almost for me to make sounds because his shoes made such an incredible sound and everything seemed so amplified that I was a little bit thrown off center because I didn't realize that when I was sitting.
How do you get back to center?
Well, I think what I was
Ba,
doing.
ba. That's how you get back to center. It's just, hey, I got to get back. I got to start grooving. I'm here to do sound. Do. letting us come in. Do, silence. That's where I go. That's where I always go. I want to live there. I want to live there as much as possible when I'm working. And now, there's that painting again. Ooh, what is it telling me? Ooh, they're kissing. Ooh. Back to sound. So I don't even know the difference after a while. I'm being informed while I'm playing my route. I'm just going on my route. And you are coming in and you're going out. As I play my route, do-dum, 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 for the length of the improv. And the same thing with this person. I'm just playing my state of being, and here's this sound. And suddenly this sound and my state of being makes me feel like I have a big behind. You know what I mean? And it's dragging along the floor and whoop, gone. I'm just here standing around, moving and stopping, and now there's that sound, and I'm an opera singer with a huge chest, and that's gone, but here I am. So you're just moving along, and at times you meet, hang out a little bit together, and keep moving along. So that's basically what it's all about. And that's without a theme. Okay? So it could be all over the place. So did I make it any clearer in terms of what we're doing? Okay, good. Okay.
Does the sound have to be in cycles?
It's in cycles when you're playing it that way, but don't forget you have arbitrary choices. I like to play cyclical. I like to let things lead them to other things and find my riff, and then I like to, when my center starts to rise, I certainly arbitrarily and deliberately go to another sound, or arbitrarily and deliberately go to a silence. Okay? Yeah, that's,
Scott?
yeah.
Now, what if she would just kind of enter her sound period and didn't connect with what he was doing?
What do you mean? You mean that she didn't seek to connect, or she didn't?
She arbitrarily made a choice. I'm just going to get into my sound, and whatever happens, happens. That you can't do that. Okay.
Can't do that.
Okay.
Can't do that. You don't reach, but all you have to do really is look at it and let it in. What we're talking about here is something we were talking about initially when we had our discussion, which is, why is it so scary? You know, it's because that's the door you want to open up. You know what I mean? But it's like, well, if I open up this door, is it going to fuck up my own trip? Am I going to fall if I let somebody else in it? No, you got to like get your own trip strong, and now through the strength, you can let anything in. Doesn't make any difference. It's just grist for the mill. It's just something to play with. If I want to play with it, if it relates, if it tells me it has a relationship to what's happening.
So that's what I thought you meant when you said that we could do anything now.
I do.
That it's like you can let that in, you can play with it.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yes. Okay, here we go. Two more people.
She was doing her individual thing, and
Everything looked, it looked pretty okay to me. Maybe, how are you feeling?
Well, I'm a codependent, I admit it. I'm sorry. No, I mean,
15%, 15%, I would say.
to you, I can say that. No, and I felt like that I felt like there were times where it was affecting me and turning me into places that I felt like I don't normally go at, and then at times I was felt like I was just like going, and then like I find the holes in the ceiling, you know, and then I was just there, and then her sound felt like it was coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, okay.
That was great.
Okay.
You know,
yeah.
and that was just kind of, and I was like, part of me, in my usual behavior is just to say, nope, just stand straight. And don't go with anything, in a way, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just,
So that's basically where you want to get to, a place where you're not reaching and you're still in motion.
but you're not, I wasn't, and you're also not like going with all the good, you know, like, when you're in that state, it's almost like you feel like you can
You're not
really,
reaching. You're not reaching. Okay. How are you, Jane?
Our God, as far as interacting with her or not interacting,
just as
how
far
was I
as-
feeling?
Yeah. Let me take it to another place.
Okay.
Can you recall any surprises on the way in terms of what you were doing or what she was doing and vice versa, Deborah, you to Jane? Like one was when you looked up at the holes and it was coming out of your mouth.
yeah,
The sound.
that was
Okay.
it.
Yes, I became aware of that, but it, and so, yes, periodically I would say, oh, look,
That's right.
we're in the same direction,
Right.
oh, look.
Right.
Now we're
Yeah,
going
there
in
was
some-
enough-
But it was like, one, didn't feel that I was saying, okay, now I'm gonna make her do this,
Right.
or
There was
I'm
one-
gonna do this because she's doing that.
Okay.
There was one sound that she was making that I felt like I was just standing there, and I usually have a hard time letting my shoulders go, and I really felt the weight. You know,
Oh, I saw
felt
that
myself-
one too, that was right here with your back.
Yeah.
So sometimes as we develop more and more, because this stuff we're doing now, it's getting like pretty far out. You know, what we're going to come to eventually is a place where it's going to be this understanding, which is the internal dialogue I'm talking about, but very subtle. We're like, right, oh right, ooh, yeah. Yeah, that's it, Jane, do me some more, and that's right, Debbie, do me. Okay, so we're doing each other right here.
Yeah.
Let's really do each other over here for a while and see where, if we stay in this space, where we get to.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is something I've been talking about in all the exercises. But the daring to do that, when those connections come, it's like, I don't quite know where we are, but yummy, 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 those holes in the wall. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go, two more people. Now, same thing, only be careful. Here's the theme. Born to be wild.
Born to be
Wild. It's okay if there's nothing.
No, I mean, I kept going places.
Okay.
I kept going places, and what was happening to, I mean, I was my state of being going places, being, state of being. And then there were times, I mean, it was interesting, I mean, this is just the most recent, the noise that he made as my arms were going down. I was a tin man, born to be wild, you know, without my little can of oil. And I had moved my head just as he was doing the, you know, oh, yeah, I'm wild, you know. I get,
Okay.
I kept feeling like it was the beginning of this series of peace, like the first stage of peace. Born to be wild. I kept thinking she wasn't wild yet, which was, it was like the birth of what was going to happen, like something, I was waiting for something really dynamic.
How many times did either of you make the arbitrary choice to just play your own thing? In other words, just dig your own thing.
how many times?
Yeah. Did you make any choices in that realm?
I think 3-4 times for me.
About 4 times for you? What about you?
I felt most of the time I was into my own sounds. But I was aware of her. I felt I wasn't working her.
I mean, I'm talking about into your own sounds in terms of just playing your own sounds for their own sake.
I thought I was doing that, and I was aware of her. The only time I started to feel a little coordination with her towards that.
I'm talking about for yourself.
Yeah, because while you're saying it at the own sake, the only time I started to feel maybe something was together to be after the arms, and that I thought I was just making my own choices of that sound.
Okay. Okay.
Appropriate.
Okay. I'm gonna go. Give me like 4 minutes. Okay. Someone else want to work?
Sound?
Yeah, I want to sound.
Okay.
Did you realize you were outside space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you.
I'm supposed to be outside.
Where's Stefan?
You were way over here, Jody. You were like on sitting on his
Here.
lap.
I was.
That's kind
I
of
always
cute.
think of that line. It confuses me.
I
always
keep
think of this
wanting-
line.
He changed. He wants to be here and then he changed.
Yeah, I always think of that line.
What was it?
He was so.
Remember now.
I wanted to go out there and be your sounds.
Oh.
I wanted to be your sounds. I wanted to try it again and just yield to the sound and yield to the sound in a state of being. Sorry.
Okay.
Good, that's the way they move me.
I think in watching you, it sort of reminded me that it sort of helps me when I do sound if I don't look at the person really, if I start out looking at more of the space rather than.
You have to do that at least two.
Yeah.
At least also.
Yeah.
But to start out, to sort of like, I don't know.
I didn't feel, I don't know about him, but I didn't feel any,
No, there wasn't a.
I think there was one moment, there were a couple of moments where I felt Jody and you met. They were like
But
little,
not intentionally.
they're
They
paused.
didn't do anything.
we're not looking for intention.
No, I don't, what I mean is it just happened to pass through each other, and there wasn't a consciousness. I guess that's what I meant by the
No,
intention. I saw it happen.
Yeah, well, I felt, that I was aware of the sounds, but I didn't want to be dictated by the sounds and start going as a puppet to the sounds. I was very aware of everything the sounds, and at one point, well, I thought that I really felt when I was in a circle in the middle, when I was circling, it felt very much in tune, and it felt also at one point, it felt like the sound there was something behind me. And I felt like something was always behind me. There was a sound that you make that's very eerie. Something was behind me all the time. And I kept feeling like I had to check what was behind me. And then at the end, looking at you, it was real weird. You became like some kind of weird little thing in my head. Like a consciousness or an ego or a devil or an angel or just a little you were my consciousness somehow. And this is what you were saying to me, and I was like looking at it, and it was like, what's it saying to me? So I felt, I was really aware of it, but I didn't want to be dictated by the sound and go,
Right.
kind of thing.
So do you,
Okay, let someone else work sound. I'm gonna work inside, give us another 4 minutes, okay?
No, it wasn't ever working camera, but I definitely didn't work. Let it manipulate me.
Okay, let's continue.
Okay, let's continue.
Did you sit down?
Would you sit down, Jody? Your time is finished. Or has passed.
Okay.
Oh, don't stop now.
Yeah.
I let you along already.
You didn't see.
Um, I don't know, but sometimes I think over there, it's easier to get trapped into feeling a responsibility to do something other than get your own jams going.
Yeah.
Sometimes that responsibility I would notice or feeling
You
that
gotta get back
responsibility.
to rhythm.
And then I would go back into there.
You mean a narrative of what's going on?
Well, either a narrative of what's going on or kind of awaiting for something to happen, rather than a in other words, getting into your own joy of sound and rhythm. And in the process of that, looking, rather than trying to create something for that person to work with, or waiting for that person to give you something to work with. That's what I mean by getting your own independent life going.
Yeah. I saw.
Like for myself, I caught myself a couple of times waiting for a sound that would relate to what I was doing, and I knew that was time for me to get back to my own doing. Anytime you experience that, that's the time to let go of that. Okay? Until these things find you.